Hi everyone, welcome back to my domain, the far out universe where I talk to some far out people about everything under the sun. I hope that all of you are having a wonderful day. Remember to breathe in and breathe out. Before I let you guys go, Foul is on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pandora, Amazon Music, and all podcast players absolutely free. Foul is on YouTube. However, some episodes are missing. I would do everything in my power to stop lagging and start putting it up. I'm really just waiting for a thumbnail to be made. I want to focus on YouTube on commentary that I see in the Matrix and surrounding me and pretty much just word vomit what I think about it. Now to our sponsor. Rebecca Eichen, an astrologer for 25 plus years, specializes in relationship from everyday decisions to critical life-altering moments. Rebecca shares with you her practical wisdom and guidance for your life's journey in becoming who you're meant to be. Using Jungian psychology, Rebecca guides you to see the potential that hides in your hidden self, your shadow. Sign up now for the Shadow Work in 7th House webinar or have a private consultation and find out how the universe has always had your back. You just didn't know it. Remember guys, when you guys sign up, go to shadowdance.com. Go to the bottom and say that Boon Him sent you. Because if you guys do that, it really helps out. It helps the sponsor and it helps me. Are you a podcaster looking for a hosting site? Try Podbeam. They offer unlimited hosting plans and business plans, which I will link down below. Doing so helps support the Far Out Wisdom podcast. The unlimited hosting plans, make sure you go to www.podbean.com/FOW, F-O-W. And the business hosting plan at www.podbean.com/pro/FOW, F-O-W. Like I said, I will link all the information down below so you guys can do that as well. Remember to follow Foul, and also all my stuff to donate is down below. Your contribution to Foul helps me update my equipment and pay for software to assist in better quality. Okay, now to our guest is Randell Stroud. He is the host of Nalani Global podcast. Nalani Global, it's pretty much like a platform to discuss and educate the public on basic human rights, current events, and features extensive conversation on masculinity, martial arts, and love for international cultures. And Randall, yes, if he's listening to this, yes, I got this from his podcast. Randall talked to feature the likes of high-level combat sports such as UFC legend Cung Lee and Muay Thai champion Kevin, the Soul Assassin Ross. And if you guys don't know who Kevin Ross is, he is the boyfriend of Gina Carano. So I think that's the big Kevin Ross is seen on the Joe Rogan podcast as well. We talk about the Khmer Rouge, masculine, feminine, the combination of chaos and order within us, MMA, kung fu movies, and basically everything under the sun. So if you enjoyed this conversation like I did, make sure to love, like, share, Foul, and share with everybody, including your Nana. Who knows? Maybe she likes talking about some weed and psilocybin or something. So as always, guys, stay far out. Bye.
Is my audio quality decent?
You're gonna be fine. It's Zoom. Zoom's audio is like really good. So it's recording at the moment. We're just gonna have random conversation, but it's on Zoom. And like I said, this is my first time using it. Well, a couple times, and the audio is fantastic on Zoom. And the CCP, if you're listening to this, great job. Communist Party of China. Great job. So how are you today, Randall? Before we begin with this conversation, Randall, can you tell the audience who you are? Just a little bit information about you.
My name is Randell Stroud, and I'm 33 years old. Grew up in the United States, but most people know me as a martial artist. That was my first love. I got picked on a lot being a white kid that grew up in a mostly, black slash, Cambodian community.
Mm-hmm.
And, martial arts sort of got me interested in studying other cultures and other philosophies. I mean, I've written books on the subject, and I've always just been kind of a free thinker and a rebellious person. I've led protest movements. I've ran for public office, and you can pretty much just Google my name, and there's plenty of things to research right there that'll come up for you. So I'm just all around a self-described, interesting, intellectual kind of guy, and I've had a ton of experiences. I've traveled around the country talking about fathers' rights. I've spoken to the Congress about masculinity and these sort of issues. So I'm kind of a bit of a Renaissance man. I've done a little bit of everything.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I guess that'd be the easiest way to describe me is I'm kind of a jack of all trades.
Yeah, you're like a philosopher too. Yeah.
But, martial arts is the one thing that has always brought me back to my center, whether it's suffering a job loss or going through a breakup or whatever it is, just, trying to master your mental aspect and your physical body is something that has always been a saving grace for me as well. So, I mean, I could do a 2-hour podcast just on talking about the martial arts and the evolution, the philosophies behind it.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, he's going to make a lot of appearance. And to give you guys a background information about how me and Randall met, we met through Francis, the Reign King podcast. And if you guys have the opportunity, check his podcast out, because that guy is the most nuanced Stalinist, actually, dude that you can have a conversation with. And that's how I met you. So tell us a little bit about your podcast, a little bit about that.
Well, a couple of years ago, me and a Cambodian friend of mine, we started this organization called Nalani Global. And Nalani is sort of this term that pays homage to a Buddhist principle of the lotus flower. The lotus flower is buried in the mud, and it goes through all these, difficult processes to go up through the water and through the sun, and becomes this beautiful flower. So we called it Nalani Global, the struggle for the entire globe. And we had raised some money and did some things, to send over to some villages in Cambodia to help out. But the person I was working with at the time, we sort of had a falling out. We had a different vision on where we wanted it to go. So I kind of just continued it. And I was like, well, I can use this as a platform to sort of talk about all of my passions, martial arts and politics. And I am a supporter of masculinity. I think that we need more of that in this country, but then also getting people more culturally aware, because I think that, especially many Americans, they have something in common with the Chinese. They think that they're the center of the universe.
Right.
Right. So I have a lot of friends that are from different places, Korea, Japan, the Philippines, Mexico. I mean, most of my friends, I would say 75% of them are probably from other countries. They're first generation or second generation immigrants. And it's just so cool hanging out with them and just learning their ways of life. And I want to share all of these lessons that I've learned. And that's sort of what my podcast, Nalani Global, is a culmination of all of my experiences and congealing it together and presenting it to my listeners.
Exactly. So have you taken a trip to Cambodia? I think you have, right?
No, I've never been to Cambodia. Because of these coronavirus lockdowns and everything, a lot of travel plans will be put on hold, but I definitely hope to do some more international travel before I leave this earth.
Yeah, that's the same thing that I want to do it. And like, I have been talking to my talking to my husband Jeremy to go live in Cambodia, because the fact that, dude, the freaking property there is so cheap. You know, it's like I think for $44,000 US dollars and converted to real in Cambodian money, you can get like 3-story mansions and stuff like that. But the difference between the countries is that I'm an advocate for free speech, and you can't have that in Cambodia. Well, you can be critical of other governments, but if you talk bad about the government of Hun Sen, then it's not going to look good on you. So I had a podcast that I was supposed to do with an ex-Marxist, and I couldn't because he lives in Cambodia. So it's very difficult for him to come on because he's very critical of the Khmer Rouge. So you know about the Khmer Rouge, and you know my audience know who they are. That's interesting that you group around Cambodians. Were they refugees as in victims of the war, or were they the perpetrators like the Khmer Rouge, like my father? Do you know that?
No, they were victims. They were people who were fleeing for their lives.
Yeah, definitely. And it was a very brutal regime. And I got my you follow me on IG, and if you guys you can follow both of us on Instagram. You see a lot of our faces. Okay. But I bought a krama. It's like a conditional Cambodian scarf. And I bought a red one, and the red krama, or the red scarf, as you know, Randall, it's pretty much the symbol of the Khmer Rouge and what they wore. And that was the farmer, the working class, of what they wore out in the fields. And that's pretty much what Pol Pot wanted to do. He wanted the new people, quote unquote, to go to the fields and work. And I wear this because, you know, like Jesus Christ, as you know, Randall, he carried the cross. He carried the burden of the sins of the people and stuff like that. That's pretty much what I'm doing. To my message, my podcast too, is to educate people about the Khmer Rouge. And as a child of a Rouge, it's my payment back to the universe for my sins. Well, for my father's sins. And that's pretty much how I feel. Of course, if I would have met the Cambodian that you grew up with, they probably will forgive me. But in my mindset, I feel like this is my duty to say sorry for what my father did. You know what I mean? Because in the Cambodian culture, as you know, Randall, we believe in karma, and pretty much like everything that you do, it goes back to the generation over. And I always felt that with, you know, because I suffer from a lot of mental illnesses as well, and this is possibly if you ever heard the term that trauma can pass on to their kids, and pretty much that's how I feel. Like I feel like every single day I feel like post-traumatic stress disorder, and I have never been in war ever. And you know, I wake up every day anxious, OCD, depression, and stuff like that. And I feel like my sufferings have made me stronger. It made me more talkative. It made me more humble. But at the same time, people don't see the boon behind the scenes. And so I stopped complaining about my sufferings and kind of embrace it, because I feel like this is my way of paying back to what my dad did, you know, under the regime. And of course, some people can make the argument that they don't know, that he didn't know because he was forced to do these things. You know, that's pretty much what communists do. I mean, if you don't do what they say, well, guess what? You're going to get a bullet into your brain. You know what I mean? So that's my rant.
Well, you know, there's a lot to unpack with everything that you said there. So first off, I'll address what you were talking about with. So your father was a member of the Khmer Rouge, correct?
Correct. And so he fought side by side with Pol Pot in the jungle. Yeah, I think he was protecting him. Yeah.
Well, just like in our current military, and you know, I like I said, I have a lot of friends who were refugees fleeing from that situation in Cambodia. But, you know, and we have conversations about this even to this day. I'm still in contact with many of my Cambodian friends.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
And even with our current military in the United States, why do most people join the military? Mm-hmm. Oh, we'll give you all these benefits. You know, we'll give you a free education,
That's true.
a house, and this and this. So some of my Cambodian friends, and maybe this will make you feel slightly better, but I've asked them that question, like, well, how do you feel about those former soldiers who were in the Khmer Rouge, mm-hmm. but they regret it? And they were like, some of them are very angry. They're like, oh, screw them. I hope they, burn in hell. But many of them were like, hey, you know what? They're humans too. And many of them were forced by the gun in one way or another to join, or they were simply just, misinformed. It was like, hey, join this movement. Oh, it sounds like a great deal. But then once you're in it, it's hard to get out. Just like, I'm not going to say any names, but I have friends right now who are in the military, and they say it's the best decision they ever made. But then I have some other friends who tell me it's the worst decision they ever made, and they can't wait to get out. But once you're in the military or any sort of armed movement, it's not the easiest thing to speak up and say, hey, General, I don't agree with what's going on, because then you end up dead or in a military prison.
Right. And if you guys have a chance, check out the documentary. I believe it's called Ankar Awakens. It's on Amazon. It's on Hulu, I believe, and it's on Netflix. It pretty much it showed a soldier who escaped to the Thai border, and that's pretty much what my parents did. They escaped to the Thai border, and he said, I understood. He was in an interview, and he told the journalist, he told the reporter, I joined this movement because I thought it was going to bring us justice. But when the killing started, I had to leave. So he made the decision to leave. And that's pretty much what my mom and dad did, because you can't leave. If you leave, it's like a betrayal to Ankar. So Ankar is pretty much like the fascists, what they saw at the state. If you betray them, it's like the collective. You betray the collective's principles, values, pretty much just stab in the back, and they will kill you for that. So yeah, totally understand what you're trying to say. And like with the military, I was about to join myself, but then I changed my mind because the fact that in 2000, I think you talked with Francis about voting for Ron Paul, the revolution movement. And me too, as well. I became a libertarian for quite some time because of the fact that when I first started voting, I think you and I are the same age, was Obama, right? It was our first real election, was Obama. And then I saw the war, and I said, no. I was like, this is not. And to give you guys a little bit kind of what's happening right now, currently, Biden, more bombs drop.
Bombs over Syria.
And we haven't, hey, Biden, you owe me $2,000, man. So you owe $2,000, man. And so, but.
Well, there was something else I wanted to touch on too, is you were mentioning mental illness and PTSD.
Right.
You don't have to be in the military to suffer from PTSD. If you
That's
Google
true.
my name, Randell Stroud, one of the first articles that will come up is an article from a local news station where I live. A bullet actually grazed the back of my head back in November. I was walking down the street, and there was these two black guys who were holding Bibles, and they were, saying that Asians and white people can't go to heaven, and blacks are the true Jews.
Oh, wow. Were they the Black Israelites? Is that who they were?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
The Black Hebrew Israelites.
Yeah.
So I start arguing with these guys, and there's a crowd of people behind them, and they're sort of, supporting them. And then somebody in the crowd got into an argument, pulled out a gun, and started shooting, and 8 people got hit. And then I was one of the only ones, the lucky guy. The bullet merely scraped the back of my head. Had that bullet moved over just an inch, I wouldn't be talking to you right now. And just growing up, and I grew up in a pretty dangerous neighborhood for the most part. I mean, it's been gentrified now, but 20 years ago, the neighborhood that I grew up in, I mean, it was just like poor white kids, poor black kids, and poor Cambodians. And, and now that I'm 33 years old, all the experiences that I've been through, I've walked in the middle of stores being robbed, and just growing up in this environment, those things have residual effects on you. So you don't have to have a military uniform to be affected. I mean, people commit suicide over getting a divorce. Trauma comes in all kinds of shapes and forms and sizes. So PTSD doesn't discriminate against,
That's
any
true.
sort of people going through trauma out there. I just wanted to touch on that and sort of just share my experience with that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Trauma can last a very long time. And I was going to therapy for it. And there is a program that you use to kind of reprogram your brain. And that's pretty much what they're doing. And so I have been open about my trauma and stuff like that. And I chose to do psychedelics to kind of, try that out because, like I was on antidepressants for quite some time and it really made me feel like a zombie. And you know what I mean? Like it's just not natural for me. And look, I'm gonna make this clear. If you are taking antidepressants at the moment you're listening to this, continue to do so. It's very dangerous if you stop taking your medication because it's going to lead you to places you don't want to be. So, but I want to try that out. And my parents, being they weren't even boomer status. They were like the generation before the boomers because they were villagers. They don't understand Western medication. They don't understand any of that. I mean, if you have a mental illness that you go to the doctor or they believe you're an exorcist, they exorcise you, you know what I mean? And
right.
my family were all, my mom's side, my grandfather who was Laos, actually, he was a shaman. And my great grandfather before that was a shaman. And so we practice, our family line practice magic and stuff like that, spirituality and stuff like that. Like we don't believe in medication made by man, but by God, which is the nature of things. So that's what I think, how I feel like I'm brought onto the earth for. I don't know my purpose or anything like that, but that's how I feel. Like I'm very empathic. So pretty much I feel anything that you feel. Like Randall, if you're anxious, I will feel your anxiety. If somebody's hurt, I can feel their hurt, their pain and stuff like that. I know that sounds really silly, but that's just my way of feeling you and understanding you. That's why I attract a lot of philosophical people like yourself, spiritual people who are very deep thinkers. And so that's my circle. And so maybe possibly I don't have depression. Maybe it's just me feeling other people's emotion. I don't know.
Well, I want to chime in real quick. Have you ever heard of this term called depressive realism?
Mm-mm.
So it's a term that is very controversial and most psychologists don't recognize it, but I totally recognize it. So there was a psychologist, I can't remember his name. I'm sure a simple Google search of the term depressive realism, you can, find plenty of information, but it basically means it's this theory that the reason why some people are depressed is because they simply understand too much. Right. And it brings me back to the Bible in the book of Ecclesiastes, a book that was written by King Solomon, who, according to Christians, is the wisest man who has ever lived. In the book of Ecclesiastes, there's a verse in there that says, those who increase their knowledge increase their sorrow.
Yeah.
And then so that's sort of what the term depressive realism is based off of is, you're not depressed. You just see the mechanisms behind everything. So like a normal person, they'll go to McDonald's and they'll order a Big Mac and they'll eat it and enjoy it. But someone who has depressive realism, they see that Big Mac and they're like, yep, there's GMOs. There's, 3,000 milligrams of sodium. That thing is horrible for you. Or someone with depressive realism, they'll go to a football game and be like, yep, the government is subsidizing this event right now and wasting our tax dollars, while everyone else is just mindlessly enjoying it.
Right. And I totally agree.
So
yeah, go ahead.
So perhaps, especially nowadays where we're bombarded with information and we can literally get addicted to information. I mean, sometimes I sit on my phone for hours just reading Wikipedia articles about, gravitational fields. And I'm like, why am I reading about gravitational fields? Yeah. This is not my job or my course of study. But nowadays we are addicted to just knowing things. And I think it's cool. But on the other hand, it's sort of, can suck us into these dark holes of where perhaps we know a little too much, and it takes the joy and wonder that we had whenever we were children, where we could just enjoy, playing with a balloon, and it didn't have to be this complicated thing,
Right. We're millennials, by the way. We were in the generation where we were raised old school with new school. So we were like stuck in between with
bipolar generation.
Yes, and it's so going back, adding on to what you were saying, it's like information overload. Like we're consuming so much junk. It's like our mind, it's like with social media. So I'm cutting back on my social media, and I feel like it's kind of necessary to have, if you are a podcaster, but at the same time, it's best if you don't engage with a bad comment or anything like that, and kind of unplug yourself a little bit and enjoy nature a little bit more of reality as is. And so, with me, how I like the fact that you brought up depressive realism, and I googly goo it real quick. And so depressive realism, this is on Wikipedia. It's a hypothesis developed by Lauren Alloyd and Lynn Yvonne Aberson that depressed individuals make more realistic interference than non-depressed individuals. Although depressed individuals are thought to have a negative cognitive bias that results in recurrent negative automatic thoughts, maladaptive behaviors, and dysfunctional world beliefs. Depressive realism argues not only that this negatively may reflect a more accurate appraisal of the world, but also that non-depressed individuals' appraisals are positively biased. So I totally understand what you're saying. Like, I look at the world and I'm looking at the trees and stuff. I was like, oh my God, you're going to die pretty soon. I was like, you're going to die pretty soon because I go, I'm looking at people like, I can't seem to enjoy public places, because I'm looking at the world as is. And I like the fact that you brought up about GMOs. I'm like, you're eating an animal that just got slaughtered. You're eating something from China. I go, we are operating on a world made in China at the moment. And I'm pretty sure that the microphone that I'm speaking is from a slave. I think about these things, and it's like, it's ridiculous that I'm thinking about these things, but at the same time, maybe possibly I'm just a realist and I just see the world as is. You know what I mean? And so that's the thing. That's why I refuse to take medication, and more I want to kind of explore psychedelics and stuff to kind of fix my brain. Maybe it's not broken. Maybe I'm just too realistic.
So have you delved into psychedelics at all? Or
I talk about it a lot, and I'm in the process of getting the hell out of California, right? Yeah. And so I'm like I want to try it out, because I like trying new things. I like talking to new people and stuff like that. I like to explore. So I was like, you know what? Let me try it real quick. Let's see.
Well, I've delved into it when I was in my, early 20s, like 19, 20, and I actually went on a vision quest. For people that don't know what that is, it's sort of like a Native American ritual that's specific to certain tribes. But I met a friend at one of my jobs back then. He was, half Lakota and half, his mother was just a typical, I guess, white European ancestry American. But I went to a vision quest ceremony with him, and you basically can't eat or sleep for several days in a row, and you do lots of hiking and physical exercise.
Oh wow!
And they bring you to the point of collapse, and then they gave me some salvia, which is a psychedelic herb, and then they made me drink this tea. I don't know what was in it, but I definitely had a vision. My parents had been divorced for a couple of years at that point. And my dad sort of went MIA for a little while, and I was worried about him. And I had this pretty crazy experience. Like I literally went inside of my own brain, and I saw memories of my childhood playing out like on a movie screen theater. It was pretty intense. But if you're going to do mushrooms and these other sort of psychedelics and these things, it also had negative experiences for me too, like residual effects. I think in some ways it sort of increased my depressive realism, because it made me even more hyper aware of the world around me. So my recommendation would be, if you are going to do it, you definitely need to be in a place where you feel calm and safe, because if you do it in an environment where it's kind of unknown to you, or you feel any sort of anxiety, whatever you're feeling in that moment, it's going to get amplified times like 1,000.
Right.
So you can have what's called a bad trip, and that's where you literally lose your mind. You start thinking negative thoughts, and those negative thoughts start multiplying themselves, and then all of a sudden you start hyperventilating and thinking, "Oh my God, I'm about to die!" And
like a panic
please
attack.
Help
yeah.
me.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna do it, have people in the house with you that you can trust, and be in a calm, relaxing, environment, and do your homework, and read about things like, the, Vision Quest and different things like that. Like psychedelics. I'm not telling people that, oh, you have to do it. If you don't do it, then you can't reach any sort of enlightenment.
I agree. Yeah.
I'm not saying that you have to do it or that you shouldn't do it, but if you are going to do it, there's definitely a preparation that comes with it that you should look into.
Correct. I totally agree with that. And right at the moment, I'm training. I'm getting my certification in as an LAP and a hypnosis. So I feel like it's my duty to kind of heal people, because this is just my thing, and maybe you kind of agree with me, but I like taking care of people. That's pretty much what I like to do. I like when I was little, when my sister got hurt. I remember one time when I was like little, I was like 5 years old, 6 years old. My sister got hurt. And I pretty much just bandaged her up, and I took care of her. I laid her on the bed, and I was like, you sleep now. Let me take care of you. And I really enjoy it. And with the nurses that you see today, it's more like Western medical, whereas I like Eastern medicine. That's pretty much what I focus on, like the chi, the energy and stuff like that, the seventh chakra and all that stuff. So I want to be a hypnosis at the fact that I really want to cure people this way as well. Using psychedelics and stuff, basically like a shaman or a shaman woman. And I feel more energetic when I do things that way. Does that make sense? Like when I'm podcasting, like you and I are having a conversation right now, right? And people will feel enlightened after the discussion. And that makes me feel good. That fills my purpose. That fills my heart. And I feel like the world today is that we're in a mixed economy in here in America, like a capitalist society mixed, kind of like a socialist in a way, not socialist as in like Stalin or anything like that, but we're in a mixed economy. But I feel like people are like machine. We start young in a public education setting. We are trained to go to work, listen to the boss and stuff like that. Whereas what about the healers, like people like you and me, for example? What do? We don't fit into that mold, going to work every day, 9 to 5 and stuff like that. We want to take care of people. Yeah. We want to take care of nature. We want to, I feel like when I'm talking about God, I'm talking about multiple gods at the moment. So I feel like as being born and stuff like that, people have a purpose. I'm not really sure about destiny per se, but there's a purpose to each individual. Like you and me will make great shamans and sha women and stuff like that, training the mind. Some people make great bosses. Some people make great workers. Some people make great artists and stuff like that. And I feel like with our society nowadays, we're programmed to believe that we are meant to do the 9 to 5, work for your insurance, work for your retirement, work. You know what I mean? I'm not saying be a lazy ass. That's not what I'm saying, but I'm saying that we're not giving a chance to people like healers and stuff like that, and empathic people to explore that aspect of the universe, of reality, of the dynamic of being, right? And so us, for example, we like helping people, and I sense that from you too. You know what I mean? Like you care about people, you care about things. You know what I mean?
Well, in some ways, I agree with you, but I'll take it from a different perspective as well. It's also the attitude that you carry with you. I mean, for example, let's say that you are a cashier at a McDonald's drive-through window. You are still helping that person because they don't have to, maybe that person's super busy and they don't have time to cook and make a lunch for themselves.
That's true.
So you are you are kind enough to, put their food together in exchange for some money, of course, but you're offering a service. So that's why I don't understand the concept of job shaming.
That's true too.
where someone says, "Oh, where do you work?" Like the woman that I'm dating. At one point, she had just moved to the city, and she was brand new, and she took the first job she could get, which was at McDonald's. And I remember we went somewhere to go eat, and the waitress was just talking to us, chit chatting, and she asked where we worked. And at the time, I think I was working as a paralegal. And then she told the woman, "Oh, I work at McDonald's." And the woman laughed, and I got really offended, and we got up and left.
That's
And
rude.
I was like, I don't care what job you're doing. If
Right.
someone's paying you to do it, then that means that society needs you to do that job.
Right. Right.
But I also get what you're saying too, because of this society that we live in, where you got to pay rent, you have to go to the store and buy groceries and pay taxes and all these things. People are working themselves to death where they don't even have free time to meditate or to practice yoga or to do things that are good for themselves. And some people are working 2 jobs, and it's not really conducive to the way that we've been living for millions of years, where we spent the majority of our time sitting around and talking to each other and being outside and breathing fresh air. And we live this very mechanical lifestyle now, and it has some advantages, but you can't talk about the advantages without recognizing the disadvantages.
Exactly. And even adding just a little bit of like 15 minutes of Tai Chi, guys, it will help you guys a lot. And remember to breathe. Okay, breathing is good for you. And like going back to the McDonald's thing, I used to work for McDonald's for like 3 years, and cool job, by the way. I had a really good time. I met really great people, and I used to work at Walmart too, so I understand working. I'm a working class gal. Okay, I like work. Even though like I podcast, guys, I still have a regular job that I hold to pay for my podcast. I'm not really sure that I could like podcast full time. Does that make sense? Because I like working with my hands. Randall, the thing about me is that, like a lot of people always make the assumption that chicks, like jewelry is her best friend. You know what? If I can just own a farm and work with pigs and horses, take care of my animals, I'm happy working with my hands. Does that make sense? Like if I could just own a farm and just like grow things, like I will be the most happiest person on the fucking planet. Like taking care of horses, because think about it. I mean, the Cambodians, we were rice farmers, and I think that kind of passed down to me as well. Through my blood, my Khmer blood, right? And so that's what I want to do as well. Like the thought of having my own farm, I'll be very, very happy and content. I don't need $1 million. I don't need any of that. If I could just have. Go ahead.
Now we're sort of delving into, like gender roles and femininity and masculinity.
Yeah. Masculinity, yeah.
So to be honest, like, if we're talking about women, if I'm looking at a woman, like my ideal woman is, I don't think that I would want to be with one that was like a so-called like tomboy, where she's just, always in the dirt and rough and tumble and climbing trees. But I also, don't want to be with a woman who's like, "Oh my God, there's a spider. Oh, I broke my nail." So I think that there's a time and a place where a woman can dress up and look elegant, and she's going to a very fancy place. She's putting on a little bit of makeup, whatever. Like, oh my gosh, she's very beautiful. But if she can also, hey, I also know how to, change my own oil, or hey, I like to climb a tree and grab a coconut, and I know how to fish. And it's like, same thing for a guy. Men should be strong. They should be protectors. They should know how to fight and defend themselves. I mean, that's part of traditional, classical masculinity. But there is a time and a place where a man should put down his shield and sort of allow himself some emotional healing as well. And that's usually in the presence of a woman. Right. Like if you ask any man, what they like most about being in a relationship or being with a woman is the fact that he can sort of let down that mask and sort of be vulnerable, because when men are around other men, we have to, be in that warrior mode, because we might have to check that other guy and put him in his place. You know?
Right. I totally agree. And I think there was a podcast that I did with Francis. So Francis and I at the ranking podcast. If you guys have a chance, I would link that episode down below, where we talk about the masculine and feminine chi. So we believe that, Francis and I, that the energy between masculine and feminine, it's like the yin and yang. Everybody have their yin and yang within themselves. You have your good side, bad side, light, day, masculine, feminine. So I pretty much am I'm tomboyish, but at the same time, I like dressing up and putting on my makeup. I like to
That's awesome.
Yeah, I like dressing up, going to makeup, but at the same time, I feel like in a relationship duo or dynamic. So I'm talking about a heterosexual relationship. I'm not talking about lesbians and gays or anything like that. I'm talking about men and women. So how in my relationship is that my relationship is kind of like an old school Khmer traditional relationship. Whereas where back in the day, it was men, women, and children going out to the rice fields, helping each other out. So the family structure, we help each other out. So if the man can't do it, then the woman goes in and help him farm. If he can't hunt, or like he's wounded or something, she goes in and hunts as well. Or if she gave birth, then he goes and hunt for food, stuff like that. It's like helping each other out. And so with me, I like getting dirty, but at the same time, I like wearing makeup. I am a peaceful person, but I'm willing to fist fight if necessary. Does that make sense? You know what I mean? To protect my household, to protect my offspring, to protect my husband. And it's like backing up, the husband and as well, because, a lot of this idea of toxic masculinity, I think that's very dangerous to men in particular, because you're telling them that they're, that's like saying your feminine energy, being a female is bad. You know what I mean? Like, for example, I like being a mom. When I was pregnant with my son, I like it. I was glowing. I was bloated. I was happy. And so it was the best thing that I ever made. And I grew up in the generation of female power and empowerment and stuff like that. But in my personal opinion, and I'm going to get attacked by feminists for saying this, you guys are portraying toxic masculinity. Okay. It's like, in my personal opinion, it's like a toxic version of men. Does that make sense? Being mean, aggressive. You feel like,
yes,
the feminine movement, in my personal opinion, I don't know what fucking wave they're in right now, is that you are trying to remove, you're trying to remove the male out of the female. Does that make sense? And I think that's very bad.
Absolutely.
Because it
absolutely.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead and finish your statement. I'm sorry.
It's like I can't live without my other half. Does that make sense? And it's not a bad thing, you know what I mean, to have a masculine figure. And I respect the masculine, by the way. Courage, honor, confidence, warrior-like, that's pretty much what they attain to, masculine, right? Men. And so I'm not saying women can't be that, you know what I mean? Like, do you watch Star Trek, by the way? The Klingons, for example, is a good example of that. Whereas the women and the men, they serve with each other as honor and confidence, but at the same time, there's Klingons that are like, women who are like very feminine Klingon, you know what I mean? And that's pretty much how I feel. Like, everybody wants to be Spock, you know what I mean? But in reality, they're Klingons, you know what I mean? And so that's how I see the world. And I feel like, moving the masculine out of the picture, it's going to lead to chaos. You know what I mean?
Well, there are times when a woman has to be masculine, especially if she is a single mom, or, or maybe her husband lost his job and she has to be the breadwinner for a while. But, I'll always tell guys this, so the ultimate male, men show their love primarily in two ways, either through protection or through providing, but, if you can't do one, then you should at least be able to do the other, so maybe your husband is in a wheelchair. He's not very strong.
Mm-hmm.
He can't protect you physically, but he has a great job and he can provide for you very well financially. Or maybe the opposite. Maybe your boyfriend doesn't have a good job, or maybe he just lost his job, but he's a highly trained martial artist and he can protect you anytime that you're out on the streets. And now that's not to say that a woman can't learn martial arts and she can't protect herself.
Right.
But let's be honest. Men are naturally stronger than women. And this goes into the argument of
biology,
transgender, transgender
mm-hmm.
athletes, like Fallon Fox was a good example.
Oh,
Fallon
goodness.
Fox was a man for, 30 years of his life, and that testosterone exposure, men have harder, denser bones than women, just mm-hmm. naturally. And we carry, on average, even without working out, the average man is at least 10% stronger than a woman.
I agree.
So me as a man, and I've been, I'm 33 years old. I've been doing martial arts for like almost, about 20 years now.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I weigh, 175.
Right.
If I fought another woman in that same weight class, I would have an unfair advantage because my testosterone levels are naturally higher. And even if I started taking, testosterone blockers, that testosterone has already permanently made my bones more denser and harder.
Right.
So for millions of years, there has been, somewhat of a gender role, and the reason why mm-hmm. The reason why men are, mostly, stronger than women physically, because think about it, it makes sense in nature. When a woman gets pregnant, she's very vulnerable. And, 1,000 years ago, if a woman was pregnant, there would be wolves or other tribes that were perhaps going to try to kidnap or rape your wife. And you had to have a spear and a strong muscles to defend your pregnant wife who can't even, run at all because she's pregnant. Have you ever seen a pregnant woman, like a full-blown pregnant woman, just sprint? It's not an easy thing to do.
You can do yoga while you're pregnant, but you can't run a marathon while you're pregnant.
Yes.
Well, you can't. You can, but rare.
so all this bullshit that, there's no such thing as gender roles, men and women are equal. Men and women are not equal. And I don't say that as a derogatory thing.
Right.
We aren't equal. And that's what makes us need each other, because women are naturally inclined to be better at certain things, and men are too. Now, and that's not to say that women with, proper training and certain things that they can't do, certain
like
things
Gina
Carano.
Yeah, Gina Carano, for example. And you're friends with her boyfriend, right?
Yes.
So you're friends with, if you guys don't know who Gina Carano is, she just got canceled from the Disney movie, and she's an actress, but she was an MMA fighter first. So she and her husband are both MMA. Is she still doing MMA or just acting?
Well, she did Muay Thai at first, and that's how they met, because his name is Kevin Ross. Then she transitioned. She transitioned into mixed martial arts.
Right.
But again, if you take Gina Carano, who was fighting, I think at like 130 pounds at that time. If you take a 130-pound woman who's been training in martial arts her whole life, she could probably beat up a lot of men. But if she fought an equally trained man who was in her weight class, she would be at a severe disadvantage.
Correct. I strongly agree with that. That's like putting me, okay? It's like a 4 foot something. I forgot. I shrunk. Okay. Against Ronda Rousey. I'll get my ass beat. Okay. It's like, if you want equality.
You were talking about being in California, and California is a very liberal state.
Yeah.
And, like I think in some counties you can get in trouble and you actually get fined for misgendering and not using someone's correct pronouns. But here in Tennessee, where I'm at, they're actually passing a law right now to ban, transgender athletes from competing in combat sports.
That's
if you were born,
go ahead.
So if you were born as a male, then you have to compete with males. It doesn't. You can't just say, hey, I'm a girl now, and then just go dominate the women's division. It's not fair. But there is some backlash because even though Tennessee is a mostly conservative state, I mean, there are liberal pockets here, so they've been protesting and sort of fighting against it. And I just want to clarify that even though I do consider myself to be more on the social conservative leaning side, I don't advocate for bullying. If someone is transgender or they're gay or whatever, if someone is picking on them unprovoked, I'm going to stand up for them and say, hey, asshole, leave them alone.
Right.
You know, but just because you choose a certain lifestyle, you know, and transgenders make up, you know, less than 1% of the population, we're supposed to reorganize, you know, millions of years of gender roles in biology just to, you know, appease,
right.
you know, that small category, you know, and just reorganize society based around, you know, 2 or 3 million people. It just doesn't make sense.
It just, if you guys want to know what we're talking about, look at the fight that Fallon Fox did. She broke 2 female skulls. And if you guys don't even like, if you're not pissed seeing that fight, then you have a fucking problem, because that was brutal.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Here's a better example. My favorite female boxer of all time, her name was Lucia Riker. And she was a badass. She was a multi weight class champion in boxing and in Muay Thai kickboxing. And she challenged a male in the same weight class as her to fight in a kickboxing match.
Correct.
And the first round was actually pretty competitive. Like, she was landing some shots and had good technique. But then once the guy started landing his shots, she looked like she was getting hurt a lot more. And by the third round, she got knocked out.
Right.
And Lucia Riker is one of the best female fighters of all time.
Right.
And the guy that she fought, he wasn't even a champion. He was like a mid-level fighter.
Right. And another fighter is Amanda Nunes, is another one where Joe Rogan even said that she can probably whip his ass. But you guys have to think about it. This is skills. Okay. This is years of training the female body to be able to compete in these sports.
Yes.
You can't just expect my little ass to start fist fighting Randall. Okay. I'm not going to win because I'm built smaller. I'm more smaller than I accepted that, by the way. And like, I can't compete. I can't fist fight Gina Carano or anything like that. And I accepted that. And this is my depressive realism coming into play. But like, you know, it's like, think about it. I mean, it's not a bad thing. You know what I mean? If you want equality, okay, I totally understand, like with going to work and stuff like that, being able to compete in sports and stuff like that. I totally agree. But you guys, you have to understand, if you're a trans woman, you used to be a male, so you are a male transitioning to a female. You have an advantage to smaller females and stuff like that, because men are built to hunt, because that's their evolutionary transformation that they did, because they were hunters, right? The men were the hunter gatherers, so that passed on to you and pretty much all the men that you see. And so they're built a lot stronger than females. And Randall and I were not saying that you can't do MMA. You can't do Muay Thai or anything like that, but you got to keep it into your category. If this is just my opinion, I believe there should be a separate category. You know what I mean? Because it's just not fair. Like the Equality Act. I don't have much information about that. Do you know about the Equality Act, Randall? That one that just passed? I don't have information about that, what it is, but I'm pretty sure it has something to do with sports.
If I recall correctly, and I could be wrong, is I also think that extends to the workplace as well, right, where you can't discriminate against a worker who wants to identify as a different gender. I mean, and mm-hmm. you know, with that, I honestly don't really care. Like, hey, if a guy can do his job and he says that, you know, he wants to be called Miss or whatever, I mean, that doesn't really, I mean, as long as it doesn't get in the way of them doing their work, that's different. But whenever we're talking about contact sports, right, then it matters.
It matters. You know what I mean?
But, you know, and to, you know, I know that we've been talking about, you know, men being, right, you know, biologically predisposed to be more, you know, physically stronger than, right, women. But women also have some biological advantages over men. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't realize is that in the USSR, they actually preferred female snipers over male snipers because
Wow.
women have larger bladders. They have to take, fewer bathroom breaks on average, and women can bear long-term pain better than men. So there's many studies out there that says that men can handle short-term intense bursts of pain better than women.
Right.
But whenever you're talking about long-term intense pain, women tend to handle it better. So when you're a sniper, you have to sit in one position for hours on end without moving a muscle.
Right.
And the old Soviet Union discovered that, women's physiology was actually better for them to be snipers than most of the male snipers. And it makes sense because women have to endure pregnancy for 9 months, and then sometimes they're in labor for hours at a time. So it makes sense why their pain thresholds would be wired different than men. So there you go. Women, score for the women. Mark that on the chalkboard. We're even now. See? For the last few minutes, we've been talking about the advantages of being a man. Well, there you go. There's one for the women. So now all the men can be triggered.
And it's just, and I said this many times, life is like a video game. Choose your character. Okay. There's always an advantage because if you're a lot bigger, you're a lot more slower. If you're smaller, you're a lot more weaker, but at the same time, you're a lot more faster. That's why a lot of people like basketball players who are short as well, because they're so fast. You know what I mean? So I feel like I'm talking about the United States. I'm not talking about in any other countries in particular,
right.
But here in
America's
the United States, yeah, America, we're so fucking privileged that we complain about practically everything that we see so many issues as is. And like I said, we can go back to depressive realism. Maybe everybody's just depressive realist. I don't know. But for me, I accept reality as is, that, I'm built the way that I am. And that I totally understand that I'm a woman, but at the same time, I'm very happy with my feminine qualities. You know what I mean? That I'm able to have a baby, because when I was pregnant, it was pretty shitty. I had like a lot of heartburns and stuff like that. But when I gave birth, it was like the most beautiful thing that I enjoy it. And if I can do it again, I totally would. And like, my husband, he didn't like it because it was like really disgusting to him because of the, and he was like, no, I'm not gonna do this again. But I enjoyed, even though I was in severe pain. It was very painful. It was like, ladies, if you're listening to this and you want to be a mommy, the labor part is gonna hurt like a fucking bitch. But like, but the beauty of it is that I was carrying a human being, you know what I mean? And from somebody that I love, and like, it's a beautiful feeling to have, you know what I mean? I feel like that's lost in our current society, especially when it comes to like dating and stuff like that between men and women. And of course, you're mixing two sexes together. And then you're kind of like, oh, well, of course, you're going to start comparing yourself to other people. And like this whole feminist ideology today here in the United States, I'm talking about in particular the West. I'm not talking about like in Saudi Arabia or Pakistan or Afghanistan or anything like that, because those women are treated unfairly and it's injustice in that area. But here in the United States, come on, as a woman, you're pretty well. And just like you said, father's right. You know what I mean? Especially like in courts here in California. You know what I mean? The mom wins majority of the time. But go ahead.
Well, and in California too, you have lifetime alimony. So for all the ladies out there, if you marry a guy and you're with him for at least 7 years and he makes more money than you, then he has to pay you alimony until the day you die.
What about females? What about the opposite? Where she makes more money? Do you know? I don't know the law here.
Yeah, well, I mean, technically, a man could sue a woman for alimony as well, but, the family law courts, aka the divorce courts, they operate under what's called discretionary law. So the judge is definitely going to look down on you, as a man. They're going to be like, really? Like, you're going to let a woman, pay you alimony for the rest of your life? And, Tom Arnold, who divorced Roseanne Barr, she has to pay him alimony, for life, because they
Adele,
got divorced. And
Adele as well, the singer Adele.
So some high profile women are getting caught up, and it's only because that it's starting to affect women. Like Halle Berry, for example, she's all over social media saying how child support and alimony are extortion, but you never heard a woman saying that, 10 or 20 years ago. But now the courts are finally starting to adjust the laws. But, women don't seem to care about male issues until it affects them, and vice versa, to be honest. I mean, so if the draft came to women, because men have to sign up for the Selective Service Act, and if you don't, there's all kinds of punishments that are waiting for us.
Right.
But, if women were suddenly subject to that, they would be protesting to call for the ending of that. But because it doesn't affect them, they could care less. But now that these alimony laws are starting to affect women and be enforced, now they're starting to protest against that. Yes.
I totally agree. And in my brain, feminism movement, I'm talking about the first wave. If you want equality, you kind of have to understand that with men, they have different rules. Okay. You can see this in prison. When a man say, don't touch my shit, he means don't touch my shit. Whereas with women, when we tell each other, don't touch my shit, but it's like, that's not how the male brain works.
Well, I want to interrupt you real quick and talk about first wave feminism. So let's talk about, suffrage, the women's right to vote. Did you know that there were groups of women who did not support suffrage, and they did not want women to be able to vote?
Right. Yeah.
Because originally, in order to vote, you had to also swear some sort of duty or volunteer service to your government, whether that was joining a volunteer firefighting service or signing up for a military draft. That used to be the requirements. So the early suffrage movement, women were concerned that if they got the right to vote, they would also have to take on those male-only responsibilities of having to join a volunteer firefighting service or signing up for a potential military draft. So a lot of women were freaking out. But then they amended the rule and said, oh, well, you ladies can vote, but you don't have to have the male responsibilities that come with it of joining the firefighting forces or the military. And they were like, oh, shoot. Okay, now we're cool with it now.
Yeah, just like you said, when it starts affecting them, then it they change their mind. So like I said, my mindset's a little bit different. I believe, like, when it comes to war, for example, this is why China's going to whip our ass, is that with men and women, I believe everybody should be trained for war just in case people from Mars.
I agree. I actually agree with that.
Like, for example, this is just hypothetically speaking with a sense of humor to it. What if Elon Musk, did invade Mars? Like, he goes on Mars, right? And then the aliens get pissed off, and then we go to war. You can't just depend on male for war, because, so during World War II and stuff like that, majority of our men went and served time. So the women went into the factories and they started working. In my personal opinion, I'm kind of like, Francis knows this. We talked about it in his podcast episode where, I believe that everybody should be trained for war. Like, not necessarily like everybody, like a baby. That's not what I'm saying. But like with them, when they're grown, everybody should be trained for combat one way or another. Yeah, like here in the United States of America, we're pretty spoiled. You know what I mean? Like, we're like, when we run a mile, we're like, oh my God, the world is ending. Oh, fuck the patriarchy. It's like, it's just not the same. Yeah. Like me, I believe every man and woman should know how to use a gun. Every man and woman should be able to fight hand-to-hand combat, martial art, Muay Thai and stuff like that. Because in order to protect the nation, you know what I mean, from evasion, whatever it's alien, UFOs, or if it's from China or anybody that goes to war, because of, I don't know about the military, how big the military is. I'm pretty sure ours is huge, but at the same time, we do have men and women that serve, but majority of the time, guess who goes in and kills bin Laden and stuff like that? It's men that goes in, because they're like,
people don't realize that like 90% of military jobs are non-combat.
Right. And what is it that the statistics I think Joe Rogan talks about it. Where majority of the military industrial complex, it hires majority of women. So women are the one that's dropping the bombs and stuff like that behind the scene. From my understanding, that's what I think it is, where they employ them. They're not. It's not necessarily. Go ahead.
Well, the Air Force, which is nicknamed the Chair Force, because a lot of their job, a lot of their jobs, they do it remotely on a computer. Like a lot of these drones are controlled by remote operators, and the Air Force has the most female recruits than all the other branches.
Right.
Because they use their minds more than their bodies.
They can multitask. Yeah, women can multitask. Pretty good.
But going back to your point of women knowing how to defend themselves in their countries, look at Israel. The IDF. Mm-hmm. Women also are subject to mandatory military training in Israel.
I agree with that. Mm-hmm.
Same thing in some other countries. I think that there's 7 countries that make women do mandatory military service. Now, some
South
people
Korea,
may.
I think, mm-hmm. South Korea.
No, South Korea does.
Yeah.
North Korea, I think maybe, but not South Korea.
Mm-hmm.
But so some people may be saying that I'm contradicting myself, saying, "Oh, didn't you just say earlier that men should be the protectors and all those things?" Yes, I do think that men are better equipped to be protectors, but like you said earlier, in the case that a man is not available or that he can't provide adequate protection, a woman has to be able to step up and have those skills. Same thing for a man. Even mm-hmm. though a man is supposed to have all these masculine qualities, sometimes he has to use some of his feminine qualities, especially if he's a single dad. Right. Raising a little girl, he can't just be masculine all the time. Sometimes he has to tune into his femininity to raise his daughter. Right. So sometimes we do have to flip that switch and sort of tap in to our alter ego of the masculine and feminine. But in those cases, yes, if there was an alien invasion, mm-hmm. I'm going to tell my mom to pick up a gun and my sister and anybody,
I don't know. So like the Mars.
A woman can learn martial arts and she can get military training and still be feminine. She can still, be very respectful and wear dresses and makeup and be have her princess mode or whatever. And that's a misconception too, that if a woman knows how to defend herself, then she's automatically this masculine lesbian who doesn't respect men, and she's a feminist and she's a man hater. Right. That's not always the case. So we do have to be nuanced in our conversation.
Right. And so going back to martial arts, I'm a very big fan of kung fu movies. I don't know if you like kung fu movies.
Oh yeah.
So when I was growing up, a majority of the kung fu movies that I watch, majority of the time, women were in there as well. So I don't see the world as the feminists. Let's be more particular, white feminists. Like I don't see the world that they do. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because I grew up watching kung fu movies. So you remember that movie Iron Monkey? You remember?
Okay.
I
love that movie.
Best fucking movie ever. So remember the little boy? That's an actress, guys. That's a female that's playing a little boy. She played a male character because the fact that they couldn't find anybody that was skilled for that position because majority of the boys were grown too big. So they needed a character that was small and fast and quick. So they chose a female actress to portray a boy. So I don't know if anybody knew that, but now that female is a cop, by the way. She works for the Hong Kong Police Department. So it's like being able to tap into your feminine and masculine energy. It's a healthy thing. And I believe like this fucking fourth wave clown fest or whatever it is, it's really, really fucking up our girls. You know what I mean? It's really destroying our female qualities because I don't see feminine as a disgusting thing or anything like that, because if you look at the Greeks, for example, majority of like Apollo's sister, I forgot her name, Athena. Athena is a good example. She was Apollo's twin, I believe. I hope that Francis is gonna get mad at me. She was a warrior. She was a goddess of a war, basically. So she pretty much like Mars. He was a god of war as well. So the Greeks and stuff, they understood that masculine and feminine thing. Like we're Randall and I are not telling you to stop serving or anything like that, because when we're talking about the military in particular, the protector of, you know, the man being protector, we're talking about the family union. We're not talking about, so if with protecting the nation is a little bit different. I believe everybody should protect the nation, whereas the family unit, the first one in line to protect pretty much is the men, right? You know what I mean? It's like, and then the first line to protect the offspring who? The mother, because who, you know, when you give birth, it's not the male they see first, it's the female, because we have the equipment to feed our offspring. You know what I mean? With breast milk and stuff like that. So of course it's going to be the female that's going to protect first. If you watch Ice Age, I'm sorry, I'm bringing Ice Age into this. In the beginning of the film, yeah, I don't. Do you remember Ice Age? The when it first came out?
Yeah.
Okay,
the animated movie.
Yeah, the animated movie. Yeah, it's a cute movie. I love that movie. If you guys notice in the beginning, who protected the baby when the village was attacked? It was the mom. The mom sacrificed herself by getting killed by these, I believe, the saber-toothed tigers. And so, because to give you guys a little bit of context, if you guys want to watch Ice Age, basically the hunters were hunting the saber-toothed tigers, and the tigers came back and attacked the village. And so the mom took her baby, and then she put the baby in the river and got killed by the saber-tooth. Then the father went and go look for his offspring, and he raised the baby. This is what me and Randall are talking about. You know what I mean? You have to make sacrifices for your family unit. You know what I mean? Like I would definitely. Go ahead.
Well, one thing that people don't talk about too is we talk about the benefits of feminism, where it allowed women to choose to choose an alternative lifestyle, where not every woman wants to have kids. Not every woman wants to be a stay-at-home mom. They want to have a career and go make a name for themselves in the world, you know, whatever. And that's completely, you know, fine. Like, I believe that we're all free individuals, but there were some side effects as well. I mean, think about this. If you have a two-parent home where both parents are working, then more than likely that kid is being raised by a stranger, aka daycare, right. And that child is not being breastfed, they're given formula. Right. Whereas for millions of years, the woman stayed behind and she breastfed the child and she nurtured the child during his developmental years. And then the father was out hunting and protecting. And then, you know, there were these clear roles where, hey, I'm the man and I'm going to do this list of things, and you're the right. woman and you're going to do this list of things. And that worked for millions of years. Mm-hmm. But now we live in this new age where we have money and an economy, and we have mortgages and all these things. And like you said, whenever men went off to war during World War II, the women were left behind and they still had bills to pay. So they're like, well, I guess we got to go in the factories and do our husbands' jobs. Mm-hmm. And then once the husbands came back, the women were kind of like, hey, we sort of enjoy earning our own money and being more autonomous, and we don't have to ask you for money all the time. We can pay for it ourselves. So right. it was empowering for women, and there were some good things that came out of it, but there were some definite negative things too. So for all the women out there who give up their careers to stay home, mm-hmm. to raise their children, even if just for a couple of years, even if just for the first 2 or 3 years of the child's life, so that they can breastfeed and, mm-hmm. and nurture the child, whatever. I give my hats off to those women and to those fathers as well, mm-hmm. Because splitting that income and not having a two-income household also increases the stress. But it's just so hard to navigate all this nowadays. Like, society is so complex. It's like a damn Rubik's cube. How do we get the things that worked from the past and keep it, but then also progress and evolve into what we're dealing with in this new age? It's a very tough balancing act.
It is. And when I was I was working too before I was pregnant, but I stayed home and raised my little boy, and then I went back to work when he was like 3 years old. And so I sit home, and I didn't have any income or anything like that. I should start podcasting by then. But the thing is that just like I told you earlier about farming and stuff like that, you see a lot of these people in other countries, especially like in Cambodia, for example. So like I said, men and women are out in the rice field together. And if a woman have a baby, she rests for a little bit, then she takes the baby and put the baby in the kama, and then wrap the baby, and the baby breastfeed right there while she's picking rice,
That's
with
true.
her husband. And I don't mind doing that. I like doing that. I like being able to like hold my baby near me, and I'm still near him. He's 6 years old and I'm still near him, but I don't want to bathe him too much where he's like, depending on me, and make mama's boys. Okay.
Yes.
Mommy boys. It's a very good conversation to have. Like, my brother, he's 22, I believe this year, 21. And he's a mommy's boy. He's the youngest one in the family. So I have 7 brothers and sisters. I'm the middle child. So that's why I'm fucked up. And so like my little brother, he's mommy's boy. He's with mom at all times. And so that's a whole entire different story. Of course, you hear daddy's girl, you hear mommy's girl, it's basically people, our generation nowadays, Gen Z, I believe that's what they are. They're so attached to this authoritative figure that they don't want to leave it. Does that make sense? I'm not saying that authority per se is more somebody that spoils them. You know what I mean? Like,
we live in a record number of single parent homes nowadays. Like, studies show that a child is more likely to grow up with a long-term family pet than to have a 2-parent home. And more specifically, fathers. I mean, there are women who are paying child support out there. There are single dads out there, but the majority of the time, we have a lot more single mothers. And we were talking about the bonding aspect as well. Like, some people ask, why are there so many single fathers, or why is it easier for a man or a father to walk away from his family? Well, you have to think about this. A baby grows inside of a woman for 9 months. So whenever the baby comes out, she has this instant bond, whereas the man has been outside of that sphere the entire time. So his bonding process is different. So my advice to the ladies out there is, while you are pregnant, make sure that you're inviting, your husband or your partner to rub your stomach and to try to bond with that fetus as much as they can, so that whenever it does come out, the father is feeling some sort of connection. But all these people are having one night stands nowadays, right? And they're having babies outside of long-term commitments, like marriage and things like that. And the government is subsidizing it. I mean, if you're a single mother, all you have to do is give the government the name of the man that got you pregnant, and they'll put him on child support and go after him, and then they'll give you all these benefits, Section 8, free housing, food stamps, all these kind of things. But then now the father is turned into a criminal, where it's like, hey, you got to pay this woman X amount of money, and if you can't, then we're going to throw you in jail. And then for the fathers who can pay it, they struggle, or they have to work. Yeah. And then for the men who can't pay it, they become fugitives, and they just go from state to state and just always on the run, working cash jobs under the table. And then some people will criticize them and say, well, if you want to be in your kid's life, then, why don't you go to court and fight for it? Well, the average attorney fees that a man will spend to get 50-50 custody is around $30,000.
Right.
And I don't know many people that have $30,000 just to throw away on some legal battles when they could be using that for food and rent.
Right.
On top of still having to pay the child support. So while you're going to all these court battles trying to, get this custody agreement, you're still having to pay child support in the interim. And if you don't, then you go to jail. So we have this weird system where instead of encouraging people to stay together, like back in the old days, 50, 60 years ago, if you got divorced, it was a very shameful thing. And people looked at you like, oh my God, what kind of, person are you? Like, you got a divorce. But now people have these things called divorce parties. I see them all the time in downtown. Yeah. So if you come to Nashville, Nashville is a sort of a party city. It's nicknamed Music City. But you see all these women wearing these T-shirts with all their girlfriends, drunk, throwing up in the streets, and they're wearing this, these shirts that says, "I just got divorced." They're like, "Yeah, girl, yeah, I'm divorced now," and they're looking for a hookup, and they're getting drunk. And 50, 60 years ago, that kind of behavior would have been extremely frowned upon, and people would have looked at them like they were some kind of crazy person. But now we celebrate these things. Like, have you seen these slut walks? Are you familiar with that?
No, whoa, what? What?
So
am I living under a rock or something?
These feminists come up with this thing called the slut walk, and they have them in pretty much every major city in America. And all these women just like walk through the street. Some of them even are naked, and they just, hold these signs saying, "I'm a slut." And they're like, "We're taking back the word and we're empowering ourselves." And I'm just like, Jesus, are you kidding me?
What? That is crazy.
Yeah. If you don't believe me, Google it, slut walk,
I'm going to have to
it's a real thing. And I've actually went to a feminist protest, and they get angry when you tell them, "Hey, what do you think about Muslim women not being allowed to drive in Saudi Arabia?" And they're like, "Well, that's their culture. We can't judge them." So like, liberals have this really weird thing where it's like they can criticize straight white males, they can criticize Christianity, they can criticize everything. But if you're a person of color or you're a Muslim, then like whatever you do is like, well, that's their culture. We have to respect that. It's like, it's very picky choosy.
You can't. This is what I talked about earlier. The argument that I brought up. The rules, you can't. It's like you make rules for men and then you expect them to follow it. But when it comes to women, it's a little bit different. You bend the rules. I'm pretty sure that women serve a little less sentencing in comparison to a man if a man does it. I mean, if a woman serial kills a bunch of men, I'm pretty sure she'd be celebrated as a feminist icon. You know what I mean? Like, for example, American Horror Story. I used to watch it. I don't watch it anymore. There was a series where they talk about the election and stuff like that. So they had this feminine person, and it's played by this disgusting person. I've got her name, but she's really gross. I think her name's something with Dunham. I don't know her name. It's something with Dunham. And so there was a scene where they were bashing men, and a lot of these men were like saying sorry and stuff like that. And they killed this particular dude, and they his genitals were all over the place, and they like rearranged it. It was disgusting. It was disgusting. I stopped watching American Horror Story after that. And like, if a man does it, like Jack the Ripper, for example, when he murder or mutilate those prostitutes back in the 1800s in London, could you imagine men celebrating that shit in comparison to women when they, mutilate a man? It's just, you can't. I don't know. I just really don't like hypocrisy and contradiction and stuff like that. And I totally understand. I'm not a perfect person. I'm pretty sure my arguments have holes in it, and I'm pretty sure somebody will point it out in the future. But I just don't see that you're attacking the masculine thing. I mean, it's like this is why Jordan Peterson got really popular, because a lot of men, they feel lost. You know what I mean? They did, like, what the fuck is going on? I don't even know, you know? Go ahead.
I always tell young men, I mean, you know, women can watch this movie that I'm about to recommend too, because there's a lot of universal life lessons, but specifically for men, they should all watch Fight Club.
Oh, I love that movie. Yeah, Fight Club.
That is one of the greatest movies ever made. Yeah. And it's sort of like The Matrix. The more times that you watch it, the more of the philosophical undertones that you pick up in the movie, and you can really dissect it. Because I'm a huge movie buff, right. And whenever I watch movies, I try to pick up on like what the message the director is trying to send to the audience. But the first time that you watch The Matrix, you're just paying attention to all the special effects and all the cool fight scenes. But after you watch it 2 or 3 times, you start seeing the philosophy of the red pill and the blue pill, and same right. thing in Fight Club. You know, whenever you watch Fight Club, you just think it's cool because it has all these like, you know, like fantastic sort of, you know, violent scenes, and this guy's like kind of going crazy, and it's really entertaining. But that movie is literally about a guy trying to get in touch with his masculinity and right. trying mm-hmm. to conquer his like fear of death.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's trying to discover his masculinity, conquer his fear of death, and then ultimately find purpose in living. And right. that is the great war that we're facing right now, because like he says in that movie, you know, there are no great wars to fight. There is no World War II. There are no big battles to face, because life has gotten so easy in so many ways because of technology, that we're all sort of just fat and comfortable, and we're happy with just watching Netflix and masturbating to pornography right. and eating McDonald's.
Right. And I talk with V. V is a YouTuber, and we were doing a live stream talking about masculinity, and a lot of people were really kind of happy that they heard a female understanding their perspective. And look, I'm not trying to be on MGTOW side or anything like that. I just see reality as is. And like being connected to both your yin and yang within you will make you such a better person, that to the point where you just feel happier, you feel more content, you feel, and you start attracting the good people into your life that has reached that so basically you're saying like a spiritual crisis that people are having at the moment, right? Like a existential crisis. And Fight Club is a perfect example of that. And it's a perfect example of Jungian psychology dealing with your shadow as well. And it's a really good movie, guys. They were about to make a female version of that, which I was like, what?
Oh, I didn't hear about this.
Yeah, they wanted to make like a female version of everything, which is fucking ridiculous. But it's just like, keep the character. You know, I mean, I Fight Club should just stick to its like its original.
Well, earlier you mentioned you know, MGTOW, you know, men going their own way, MGTOW. You know, I got divorced. You know, I got married when I was in my early 20s. And
sorry about that. Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, I wasn't really prepared for it, and you know, and a lot of things happened from, you know, I lost a lot of money and different things, and for a while I sort of got on that MGTOW train of where I was like, oh man, you know, everything is women's fault and this and this, but you know, it's really more of the Western woman, like you're talking about earlier. If you go to Cambodia, Ukraine, Russia, Philippines, all these kind of places, the women there are very tough and hardworking, but they're still feminine. It's really more of a Western sort of presence, where you have these women that are just very, you know, vile. But it's not just the women too. The Western man is also, you know, pretty pathetic. And a lot of these MGTOW guys, most of them make a lot of really good points about the problems in Western dating and the Western sort of divorce courts and marriage system. Right. But I feel that many of them go so far to where it's almost like they are the feminazis, you know, kind of like these hardcore feminists. They where they literally hate women. And I'm like, hold on a second. Like, I was on that train for a second after my divorce just because I was angry. But then I calmed down and everything. And I was like, hold on. Like, I have a mother and I have a sister, and especially my sister, she's a really good woman, and she grew up in America and she was raised right. And she's not doing a lot of these things that you guys are complaining about. So even though the ideology, just like feminism, has some gems of truth in there, and you should definitely study it and pick up on it, but it can definitely get cultish just like any other ideology. And you have to be careful to not get sucked in to this point to where you're literally hating someone.
Right. Don't become nihilistic. And I have made the argument many times that the problem that we have, and people are like, oh, it's patriarchy and stuff like that. It's nihilism. This is men and women, because of the fact that it's just like a lot of these movements and stuff, which is a good thing with the civil rights movement, with African Americans and so forth, and with the women's suffrage that helped people, women vote and stuff like that. But at the same time, we have to understand that we are starting to become to the point where it's like egotistical as well. We're like, I'm not going to do anything for this person because the fact that I'm not going to get anything out of it. And that's pretty toxic, by the way, if you do that. I mean, especially like with this whole thing about relationship, and a lot of single men come to me and tells me, and, I'm really frustrated. I like watching, Bella Daphne and stuff like that, and masturbating to this woman because they're fake. I mean, I'm not, it's like they're avoiding, just like my, Peter Pan. They want to grow up. You know what I mean? And so it's both men and women. To me, I feel like it's immature. Like this whole thing about like divorce parties and stuff like that. I wouldn't be happy. I mean, I'd be heartbroken.
No, well, it's not funny at all.
If it's abusive relationship. I mean, if a man or a woman were in a very abusive marriage and they leave it, I totally understand the party. Okay, but it's like if it's like, you screwed him over with money and stuff like that and then destroy his life. I don't think that's something that you should celebrate, because it's the fact that, in the end, both of you kind of got fucked in the process. And so it's a learning experience, but I wouldn't fucking celebrate it. It's immature, in my personal opinion. I wouldn't even do a slut walk or anything like that. I never consider myself a feminist at all. I never really, like, a lot of, when I was like in university, like a lot of these feminist movement, like they wanted to like recruit me and stuff like that because I'm a brown person. But like, I never really, I live in a free country. You know what I mean? Like I want to go to work, my own business, have my family, have my pretty much like a conservative talking point. You know what I mean? And I really enjoy that. I really enjoy that whole dynamic of a female and male dynamic, a duo, like the yin and yang. You know what I mean? I really enjoy that too. And I really don't want to split my orderly half away from me. You know what I mean? Because I'm a very chaotic person as is. And I'm a fucking train wreck. And if I lose my other half, bye-bye train. You know what I mean? And so it's okay. I believe like people are like ashamed to admit that they need help or they need somebody, which in reality, we all need each other in one way or another. And this is going to move to another topic that I wanted to like, get to before I let you go. You talked about, I listened to all your podcast episode, by the way, I caught up. So, yeah. So, you talked about, with Francis too, you talked about, Miyamoto, I think his name is, the Book of Five Swords.
You're talking about,
the Book of Fire
Miyamoto Musashi, the Book of Five Rings, and the art of walking alone.
Yeah. So he talks about ground, he talks about water, he talks about fire, he talks about wind and void. So I'm going to break up the fourth oath. I think you talked about this, but you didn't remember in that episode what you did with Francis. And the first one is never be late with respect the way of the warrior. 2, be useful to the Lord. 3, be respectful to your partners. 4, actually, give beyond love and grief. Exit good for, I believe it's harmony or humankind. Exit good for humankind. So I wrote that down. I don't even know who he is. My friend Lydia talked about it in her live streams that she does. She does after she's done with working for Temple for like all day. She comes home and she does this little podcasting that she does on her IG. She talks about this particular philosopher. And she told me this. She's like, you are like a warrior. You should read this. And I'm like, I am not like a warrior because if I get a paper cut, I'm done. I'm done. It's not the same. And this philosophy that a lot of people are like, not just men in particular, but women as well. I think with women, they're so spoiled that they don't know how to, when it comes to hardship, they're like, I'm a victim right away. It's the patriarchy. Like, wait a minute. This is what happens when you spoil yourself. You know what I mean? And it's
Well,
like, go ahead.
I want to tell you a story. So there was a time where after my divorce, I ended up homeless for a little while,
Oh, I'm
and
sorry about that.
I was too prideful to, go to family and ask for help. I was embarrassed. And I remember I went into a shopping mall and I was in the food court, and I just kind of like lost touch with my emotions for a second, and I started to cry.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in public, and it was really embarrassing. And the security guards got concerned and they kicked me out.
Right.
But then I thought to myself, whenever I worked, security, and I've worked in, retail environments, I've literally seen the same thing happen. But whenever a woman cries, in public, people run to her aid and are like, hey, darling, are you okay? What can I do for you? Everyone's looking to protect her and help her. But, so if a man, cries or he needs help, most people just look at him and say, hey, go work harder. You're a guy, like, go do your thing. And that's why Miyamoto Musashi is actually very revered in the MGTOW community, because he was sort of the ultimate MGTOW. Like at one point in his life, he met the woman of his dreams, and he really loved her. And in some of his writings, he talked about sleeping under a tree, because he was pretty much a homeless guy that traveled the country, engaging in these sword fights. But he would dream about her. There was whole novels written about Miyamoto Musashi where he dreamed of this woman, but he didn't decide to go his own way and not get married. He never had any biological children, not because he hated women or he thought that women were toxic, or he actually loved and adored women, but his rationale was a man, specifically a warrior, should follow their purpose first and foremost, and his purpose in life was to become the greatest swordsman who ever lived.
Right.
And that was his top priority. And he realized that in order to love someone, you have to be able to give them a huge chunk of yourself. And he just wasn't prepared to do that. And he respectfully, walked away. It wasn't about hating women or hating relationships, but it was about being true to yourself and to your calling. And he was half crazy, but half genius. And if you ever feel depressed or lonely, I mean, read his manuscript, which is only like 3 pages long, but it's called The Art of Walking Alone, his rules for living life as a lone person. I mean, he was a pretty extraordinary character.
Mm-hmm. And I definitely agree with that. And of course, you hear women too that have no kids or anything like that. They walk the walk and they have no kids. And it takes a lot of discipline. Like, I'm a fucking train wreck. I need somebody to like choo-choo train and take charge sometimes. You know what I mean? And it's okay to ask for help. You know what I mean? Go ahead.
I'll tell you about this woman that I admire. Her name is Ginger Gentile.
Mm-hmm.
And she made a documentary called Erased Families, and it was about mothers and fathers who, both got screwed in their divorces, and, they got alienated away from the other parent. The child got brainwashed, and then the other parent got forced out of the family. And she went all around the country just interviewing mothers and fathers who were basically forced out of their children's life through divorce. But Ginger, I've talked to her a lot, just through my advocacy of, changing these laws. And I think that there should be, default 50-50, parenting, custody, in cases of divorce, unless there's evidence of, like rape or child molestation or something like that. But as long as both parents are mentally stable, it should be default joint custody. You shouldn't have to spend money and fight for it. But Ginger, I think she's in her late 30s or early 40s. I mean, I don't want to throw her age out there, but She never got married, and she doesn't want to have children, but she still wants to date and be in a serious relationship and have that companionship. But she chooses to, not have children because she wants to primarily focus on her own pursuits. And she's upfront and honest, with the guys that she meets and dates. And I really admire that about her. And that doesn't make her any less of a woman. The average human produces about 90 pounds of trash in their lifetime. Right. So by choosing to not have a child, you can say that it's environmentally friendly. But on the other hand, we shouldn't shame people who want to have children, because if you raise a good child and that person, becomes a good person, then they can do wonderful things for humanity. So for all the women out there who are sacrificing and not having a family of their own, I mean, they're just as badass as Miyamoto Musashi.
And I'm not that disciplined. I like babies. I'm just going to admit that. I know that sounds like a cannibal person would say. I just love babies. I love kids. No, they're so freaking adorable. I don't give a damn if it's the child's from Africa, Japan. Babies are the shit. Yeah. It's like, they're so adorable. And so I was like, with me, I don't regret it. Even though it takes majority of my time. And my son's autistic as well. So mommy is there at all times, mommy and daddy's, trying to support him at all times. And so I make a lot of sacrifices, and, all my friends and stuff, they're childless, don't have any kids. So they're like, I think about these things, but at the same time, I don't regret it, because I feel like living a life of regret is going to make you more depressed. It's going to make your depressive realism more worse. So, I really enjoyed this discussion. I hope you guys did too. Randall's going to come back on. We went out for like an hour and a half, an hour 35. I don't know. So check out his podcast and so he's going to make a lot of appearances as well. And we're going to talk more about masculinity and femininity and stuff like that. This was an open conversation. I really enjoyed, and I really appreciate you coming on today to share your wisdom and your knowledge. And before we go, what is something, or what is your wisdom that you have learned in your 33 years on this earth that you learn along the way that you want to share with the audience today?
Okay, well, I'll try to, keep it as short and sweet as I can.
Oh, yeah,
so I am an author. I'm an author, and, I've written several books. I've been a politician. I've been married, divorced. I've been a fighter in boxing and martial arts, and I've done so much in my life, but it all comes back to the most important lesson that I learned was while I was writing my very first book, and I believe it was in 2009. It was a book of poetry that I published. And I remember coming across this quote. I can't remember which psychologist or philosopher said it, and it really doesn't matter. It's the words that matter. But to live is to suffer. To survive is to find meaning in the suffering. And I keep finding myself coming back to that point. If your life doesn't have purpose, you've got to make some kind of purpose. Like, people drive themselves crazy saying, what's the meaning of life? Why am I here? Is Jesus the way? Is Buddha the way? Relieve yourself of that anxiety and find something to believe in and pass it on to the future. For me, it's boxing and martial arts. Like, even though I do political stuff, and then I've worked as a paralegal, whenever I teach my students boxing and martial arts, kids, adults, older people, those are the best times of my life, because I'm teaching those people how to defend themselves. That is a life skill. Even if they never talk to me ever again, the skills that I showed them, they walked away with that. And even if you're not talented, even if you can't become a teacher, even if you're not good at anything, you're not particularly talented, just help people. Make things a little bit easier for the next guy. And then whenever you die, your goal in life should be to have as many people crying at your funeral. And the only way to do that is to be a servant to humanity. And I'll leave it at that.
we're not talking about a dictator, by the way. So this is totally different.
No, we're not talking about dictatorships or trying to, to rule the world or force people to come to your funeral. No,
right. People want to come voluntary to your funeral.
Yes. The more people that you help, the more good things that you do. Just do your best to leave behind as many good memories as you can in the minds of others. Be a good steward to this world. Yeah.
And leave a legacy no matter what form it is, because we live in a very digital age. And even if it's like keeping like podcasting, YouTubing and stuff like that, I mean, everybody has something to share, a wisdom, even like a little, like just finding that wisdom in this, sea of information and stuff like that. And hopefully this, his podcast and my podcast is a way for people to like learn from other people and leaving a legacy behind. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this conversation and this discussion. And Randall, thank you for coming on. And hope you guys have a very wonderful day. And as always, guys, stay far out. Bye.
Adios.